Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Our OP doesn't like it when his privacy is invaded. Let's see what happens in such cases. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Private property means private property. My husband, male 56, and I, female 59, live in a private community. There are two entrances to our tract. There are no gates, but both entrances are clearly posted with large private property / no trespassing signs. All of the streets in our tract are 100% maintained by our association dues, zero tax dollars. Also, all of our streets are considered by the city to be fire lanes, so there's no parking allowed on the streets in our little community. The southern boundary of our community backs up to the football field of the local high school where they hold commencement every spring. The problem is there isn't really enough parking at the school for everyone who wants to attend the graduation ceremony. Parking's made available across the street from the football field, and all people have to do is walk down to the corner, cross at the light, and then walk back up to the entrance to the football field. But in spite of being warned about our community being private property and not available for graduation parking, some people still insist on parking in our community so they don't have to walk as far. The last time they held a graduation, before COVID, I came home from work and almost smashed into the back of a car illegally parked on the street as I came around the corner to my home. I'd had a bad day, and that just set me off. I waited until I heard the commencement music start, then made 2 phone calls. First, I called the local PD and advised them that cars were parked in our fire lanes. The PD promptly came out and were happy to issue citations to every car that was illegally parked. My second call was to the security patrol company our association employs. They came out and arranged to have all of the illegally parked cars, there were 5 or 6 of them I recall, towed away. Guess there were a lot of unhappy people after the ceremony finished when they came back to get their cars, only to find out they had to go to the impound lot to get them back. Between towing, impound fees, and fines for parking in the fire lanes, it probably ended up running over $500 per vehicle, just so they didn't have to walk across the street. And our second story, fired and arrested 6 years later. I went to school in a predominantly white area, and being white myself, I had it pretty easy. Parents who cared for me and my activities, friends who respected each other, and all around a normal high school experience. Not really important, just want to paint the picture. Like all high schools, I was bullied, not a big surprise. I'm your generic nerdy white boy with glasses. I had a small friend group and generally never caused problems. Where it begins. There was this group of popular kids in my school who were on the football/basketball team and always caused trouble, whether it be fights or bullying. They never got expelled and were what we called super seniors, students who get held back in their senior or junior year until they graduate or turn 19. They had a bully boner for my friends and me, but it never fazed us. We were used to it over the years. This was our senior year, and we were all trying our best to maintain our grades and whatnot when I started a class called Engineering Physics second semester. I took AP Physics the year before, and my teacher recommended it to me since he taught that class. I noticed very early on that it was taken as a blow-off elective for people who thought you just build cool stuff and pass. Needless to say, it was, but the tests were physics-based. So we took them with partners. One day, I got paired with one of my friendly neighborhood bullies, who we'll call Paul. Now, I knew he slacked off in class and didn't really care because he took the class just to be with his friends, but they were smart. They never paired with each other and instead chose the smart kids to basically do the test for them. We got through it, me answering every question, and we turned it in. After the test, we were allowed to work on our monthly projects, i.e. Rube Goldberg's mousetrap car, wooden bridge, etc. At the time, we were working on a mousetrap car and was nearly done, a week ahead of the due date, when I finally got started testing different wheels and polearm lengths. Things were going smoothly when Paul came over and asked for helpful advice, basically just wanting to copy my design and use it for himself. Me. Yeah, I get it. Just use 2 computer CDs and a long copper rod for the polearm and it'll get a B at least. Paul. Yeah, I don't really know how to put it together. Could you just do it for me? I wasn't surprised, but instead of doing as he asked, I thought about showing him how to do it himself. He basically just scoffed at the idea of doing actual work. Paul. Just do it, or I'll F your sister, you little crap. So I did it, knowing that he would retaliate and probably hurt me or my sister. I was PO'd and scared, but it was whatever. Until a week later, the trials were started, then they ended. I got an A, but Paul got a C. He was furious. Part of me thinks that the teacher knew what had happened and altered his grade due to Paul doing this before, but it came with brutal retaliation. He jumped me later and gave me a black eye, 2 lacerations on my face that thankfully didn't require stitches, and a torn earlobe. Ouch. I didn't dare report him to the police or a school advisor because I knew it could be worse later. I healed after a few weeks, but I swore if I ever saw him again, he would regret everything. Now, you know I wouldn't be posting here if we never met again. Little did I know it'd be 6 years later. The encounter. Time went on, years went by, I secured a job with a security company after my associate's degree and make decent money. I mainly deal with truck drivers 95% of the time and have only written 3 major incident reports in the 4 years I've worked there. Day was normal, no problems until enter Paul. I didn't know at the moment he came in, but it was him, 100%. I found out after he handed me his license. I knew because he'd had this one for 3 years, obviously expired, and I remembered his putrid, disgusting bile face. The memories came back. I hadn't thought about Paul in years. To be honest, I even forgot he existed. Until that day. He came in, didn't recognize me, and I took care of him like anyone else, except he has to come back to me when he leaves with his outbound trailer. So I planned. I thought of what I could do to make him remember me, to make him hurt like I did. Now, I graduated with a degree in criminal justice, so I have a pretty good understanding about laws and regulations in my state, and since his license is expired, I thought I could use that to my advantage. So I basically told Paul what trailer to pick up and where it was. He went and grabbed it and brought it back to me. Me. Hey, sorry, but I gave you the wrong trailer. We're using that one later to fill a load, and the site manager just called me about it. He gave me one of those, really? God, you're wasting my time looks that I get all the time. Paul. Look, man, I'm almost out hours and I need to get out of here. Can't they just reassign it? Me. No, unfortunately, once the trailer's assigned, blah, 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 security talk. I told him he needed to get a different one instead. This was true and not part of my plan, but I rolled with it. He kept nagging about how it'll get him fired if he doesn't take his break on time and that he's already on his dispatcher's watch list. I loved it when he told me this. I was going to do whatever I could to make him waste as much time as possible, so I called our yard dog, YD, a driver on site who moves trailers in and out of dock doors, and told him a driver was refusing to drop their trailer and that he needs to be escorted off the property. The YD came and stopped in front of his tractor so he couldn't move forward and told him to unhook immediately. For a second, he waited outside of his truck yelling obscenities and stuff. Eventually, the YD and myself went into the guard shack in case he got violent. Paul, F this. Big mistake. Paul jumped back in his truck, drove around the YDs when he was in my guard shack, and left as fast as he could. I was already on the phone with my supervisor, and he told me to call the police. Trailer theft is a felony in my state. So I did. Told them the tractor number, his name, and a description, along with the trailer he had and his general direction of travel. About an hour went by before I had a police cruiser show up and ask for me. He questioned me on the whole who, what, when, where, and how. He told me that he was caught up to eventually and was arrested. They needed me as a witness and to make a statement for their report, so I made sure to mention myself, noticing his expired license and everything else. To the best of my knowledge, Paul will be getting at least a year of prison time, as felonies are a 1-year minimum, and fired from his trucking company. Granted, I technically just did my job, but I made sure to be as detailed as possible and make sure he pays for what he did to me all those years ago. Karma is a living entity, and you proved it with this post. I'm glad a violent bully got whacked. And our last story. We can't share a room in your house until we're married? Alrighty then. This is a story from my mom that I heard quite often growing up. Some background. Her parents were very religious and, particularly her mom, were very conservative. Her mom was a missionary at one point, Dad was a minister, so they weren't particularly thrilled with the boyfriend she met in college, my dad, who was a long-haired, pot-smoking hippie who was 9 years older than her and had run afoul of the law on numerous occasions. He was literally camping out in the Duke University forest while she was attending the university as a political science student, Plus, he was white, she's black, and it was the late 70s, early 80s, when interracial relationships were much less common and more frowned upon. She finally quit her studies to follow him hitchhiking all over the country after he skipped bail and fled the state to avoid getting charged with his third drug-related misdemeanor, which would have been upgraded to a felony since North Carolina was a 3-strike state. So my grandparents, especially my grandma, already disliked him. When my mom brought him home to her parents after the whole dropping out of a prestigious university and becoming a hippie thing, and they slept in the same room, her parents were unhappy to say the least. My granddad was doing his absolute best to be accepting, but my grandmother's interpretation of Christian teachings leaned much more heavily on traditional social mores than on the tolerance my granddad tried to practice. My grandma confronted my mom and proclaimed that she and my dad were not going to live in sin under her roof, and they couldn't sleep in the same room in my grandparents' house until they were married. My mom seemed to accept this. She and my dad went back to Texas, where they'd been living for a bit. They filed for common law marriage, pretty easy to do in Texas, or at least it was then. When they came back to visit again, my grandma repeated her ultimatum. My mom smugly informed her that they were married. Definitely not what my grandmother had in mind. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.